It was supposed to be just another office party. The music was loud, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. Everyone was in a mood to celebrate the company's recent success. Among the cheerful crowd was Arman, a hard-working single dad who had joined the company only a year ago. He wasn't much of a party person, but out of respect for his colleagues, he stayed. While most people danced and enjoyed, Arman quietly sipped his soda, knowing he had responsibilities waiting for him at home, his little daughter. But as the night stretched on, he noticed something concerning. His boss, Miss Sana, who was usually strict, sharp, and highly respected, was not herself. She had clearly had too much to drink. Her colleagues laughed it off, but when it was time to leave, no one stepped forward to help. People whispered, "She'll manage," and walked away. Arman couldn't ignore it. He knew what it meant to be left alone in a vulnerable state. Life as a single dad had taught him to value dignity, not just his own, but others too. So, when he saw his boss struggling to even find her car keys, he made a quick decision. He gently took the keys from her, smiled politely, and said, "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll get you home safely." The drive was quiet. Miss Sana, half asleep, muttered a few words about how lonely her life had become despite all her success. Arman didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't take advantage of the moment. He simply drove, making sure she reached home safely. Once there, he helped her to the door, made sure she was inside, and left without expecting anything in return. To him, it was just an act of humanity. The next morning, however, everything changed. Arman was preparing breakfast for his daughter when his phone rang. Seeing his boss's name on the screen, he froze for a moment. His heart raced. Was she angry? Did she feel embarrassed? Would this cost him his job? He answered nervously. But instead of anger, her voice was calm, almost emotional. She said words he never expected to hear. "Arman, last night, you showed me something I had forgotten existed: respect. No one has ever treated me that way before. You didn't just drive me home, you reminded me of what true character looks like." Arman sat quietly, holding the phone to his ear, still trying to process her words. Respect? Gratitude? These weren't the things he expected from his boss, someone who was always strict, professional, and distant. Before he could even reply, she continued, her voice softer than he had ever heard. "Arman, I owe you more than just a thank you. You could have taken advantage of my weakness last night, but you didn't. You protected my dignity when no one else cared to." Arman finally spoke, his tone humble. "Ma'am, I just did what anyone should do. Nothing more." But for Miss Sana, it wasn't nothing. It meant everything. That day at work, the atmosphere felt different. Colleagues whispered about how Arman had been the one to drive the boss home, but they didn't know the details. Arman ignored the gossip and went back to his desk, focusing on his work. A few hours later, he was called into her office. He walked in nervously, not knowing what to expect. But instead of the usual cold, professional look, she gave him a warm smile. "Arman," she said firmly, "I've been observing you for a long time. You're hardworking, responsible, and you proved last night that your character is stronger than most people's. I want you to take on a bigger role in this company." Arman's eyes widened in shock. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." She leaned forward and said, "Say yes. You deserve it. And I know you're doing all this while raising your daughter alone. That makes you stronger than anyone here." For a moment, Arman's eyes grew misty. He thought about all the nights he had struggled, balancing fatherhood and work, never asking for sympathy or favors. And now, here was his boss, the person who had once seemed untouchable, recognizing his worth. The promotion wasn't just about money. It meant security for his daughter's future. It meant fewer struggles, and finally, a sense that all his sacrifices were being rewarded. As he walked out of her office, colleagues stared in surprise, wondering what had just happened. But Arman didn't care. He knew that a simple act of kindness, driving his boss home safely, had changed the course of his life forever. A few weeks passed since Arman's unexpected promotion. Life began to feel a little lighter. He could finally afford better things for his daughter, Aisha. She was his entire world, bright, curious, and full of dreams. One morning, as he dropped her off at school, she tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Papa, when will I get to see your office? You work so hard. I want to see where you are all day." Arman smiled but didn't promise anything. He knew bringing his daughter to the office wasn't easy. But fate had its own plan. That very week, his boss, Ms. Sana, called him into her office again. She had noticed something about him beyond his work: his constant rush to leave on time, his refusal to attend late meetings, and the way his eyes softened every time he mentioned his daughter. She finally asked, "Arman, can I ask you something personal? I know you're a single dad, but how do you manage everything?" Arman hesitated. Sharing personal struggles wasn't his habit. But something about her tone felt genuine. He explained how he woke up early to prepare breakfast, rushed to drop Aisha at school, worked all day, then came home to help her with homework, cook dinner, and still find time to listen to her little stories before bed. Ms. Sana listened quietly. For the first time, she wasn't his boss, she was just a woman, hearing the story of a father's sacrifice. A few days later, she surprised him. "Arman," she said with a smile, "tomorrow, bring your daughter to the office. Let her see where her father is making magic happen." The next day, Aisha walked into the office, holding her father's hand tightly. Her eyes sparkled as she looked around. Colleagues smiled, charmed by her innocence. But the biggest surprise came when Ms. Sana walked up to her, knelt down, and said warmly, "So you're Aisha. Do you know your father is the strongest man I've ever met?" Aisha giggled shyly and nodded, hugging her father's leg. Arman stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight of his strict boss treating his daughter with such kindness. From that day forward, the relationship between Arman and Ms. Sana changed. It wasn't just boss and employee anymore. She began to support him not only professionally but personally, making sure he had the balance he needed to be both a good worker and an even better father. Months passed, and life for Arman began to transform in ways he never imagined. The promotion brought stability, but more than that, it built a bridge between him and his boss, Ms. Sana. What started as gratitude slowly turned into genuine friendship. She began to check on him, not as a superior, but as someone who truly cared. If he looked tired, she would remind him to take a break. If he had to leave early for Aisha, she adjusted meetings without complaint. For the first time, Arman felt seen, not just as an employee, but as a human being. One Friday evening, after a long week of work, Ms. Sana called him into her office. "Arman," she said softly, "I wanted to ask you something. Do you ever get time for yourself?" He laughed lightly. "Between work and Aisha? No, not really. But that's okay. She's my whole world." Her eyes softened. "You remind me of what real strength looks like. Most men I know talk about power and money. But you've built your life on love and sacrifice. It's rare, Arman." He didn't know what to say. Compliments were not something he was used to, especially from someone like her. Weeks later, something unexpected happened. Aisha's school held a special parent-child event. She was supposed to perform a small play, and every child was to bring both parents. Aisha, however, only had her father. That evening, as Arman helped her rehearse lines at home, she suddenly looked up and asked, "Papa, everyone will have 2 people there, but can I invite Ms. Sana? She's always nice to me." Arman froze. The thought of asking his boss to attend something so personal felt strange. But when he hesitantly mentioned it the next day, she surprised him with a warm smile. "Of course, I'll come." And she did. Sitting in the front row, clapping the loudest for Aisha, even helping her backstage when she got nervous. That night, Aisha whispered to her father, "Papa, she feels like family." Those words shook Arman. He had built walls around his heart, afraid of letting anyone in after his painful past. But seeing his daughter so comfortable, so happy around Ms. Sana, made him wonder if life was giving him a second chance. For Ms. Sana too, the bond was undeniable. The strong, silent man she once saw only as an employee had shown her what loyalty, love, and respect truly meant. And somewhere in between late night meetings, shared laughter, and caring for Aisha, a new feeling began to grow. Time has a way of revealing the truth. What began as a single act of kindness had now grown into something deeper: trust, respect, and unspoken feelings. Arman's life had completely transformed. His career was stable, his daughter was happier than ever, and his bond with Ms. Sana was no longer just professional. But with these changes came hesitation. Arman often asked himself, am I worthy? She's successful, independent, admired by everyone. And I'm just a single dad, struggling to give my daughter a good life. One evening, after work, Arman was about to leave when Ms. Sana stopped him. Arman, she said, can we talk? They went to her office, where the city light shone through the glass windows. She looked at him with unusual seriousness. I need to tell you something, she began. Ever since that night you drove me home, I've seen you differently. Not just as an employee, but as a man of honor. And these past months, watching how you care for Aisha, it's changed me. Arman lowered his gaze, unsure where this was going. Then she said it. Arman, I don't just admire you. I care for you. For both of you. The room fell silent. Arman's heart pounded. He thought of his late nights, his sacrifices, his daughter's innocent wish for a family. He thought of the walls he had built around his heart to protect himself from pain. But before he could speak, the door opened slightly. Aisha peeked in, holding her little school notebook. Papa, are you coming? She asked. Ms. Sana smiled warmly, walked over, and knelt beside Aisha. I was just talking to your father, she said softly. But I want to ask you something too. Would you mind if I became a part of your family? Aisha's eyes widened, then she hugged her tightly. Yes. I always wanted that. Tears welled up in Arman's eyes. In that moment, all his doubts melted away. Life had tested him, broken him, but had also given him a second chance, one he never expected. He whispered, Sana, I don't have much to offer, but my loyalty and love will never fail you. She took his hand firmly. That's all I ever wanted. And so, the story that began with a ride home after a party ended with something far greater: love, family, and a future built on respect and trust. Sometimes, destiny hides in the most unexpected places. And for Arman, it was waiting behind the wheel that one fateful night.